First up today, it looks like a pretty flower, but it's really one of Australia's worst weeds. It's called Lantana. Lantana infests more than 4 million hectares of land in the eastern states from Victoria to Queensland and has spread into Western Australia and the Territory. Weed experts say Lantana can't be contained, let alone beaten, unless councils and landowners have the right information about it. But with the release of a new control manual, landholders and managers have been given a better chance of getting the upper hand.
Lantana was introduced into Australia in the 1840s to pretty up people's gardens. But the invasive American shrub didn't take long to escape.
Lantana probably covers around 4 million hectares in Australia, covering along the 3,500 kilometres of the east coast of Queensland and New South Wales, but it's also been found in Northern Territory and Western Australia and in some places in Victoria. And as a total cost, it's probably about $22 million just in lost agricultural production. So that doesn't even begin to touch the cost to our natural ecosystems.
It's so prolific. It spreads easily. It's vegetative spread. It's also spread by birds, and it just keeps coming back. There's no 100% kill control method for Lantana. No one-off treatment that you can use that will kill it outright. Even if you're grubbing a whole plant out of the ground, you're likely to get some regrowth coming off stems that have taken root in moist soil. So it can be difficult to control.
I've used axes. I've used swabbing of stumps. I've used basal bark spraying. I've used bulldozers. I've used blade ploughs. I've used stick rakes. I've even used long cables with hooks on. I've used every method that I know.
Slashing it, poisoning it, and then ploughing it and planting another crop on top of it to try to beat it. And then we've got a D7H in there bulldozing it. And I mean, it's amazing what you can clear, but the point is that you clear it, that seedbed's still sitting there for another 2 or 3 years, and so you've got to have the follow-up.
In 1999, Lantana was one of the 20 weeds to make it onto the Weeds of National Significance list. Inclusion on the list meant national management of that weed for the first time. The idea is that national management will stop well-intentioned but largely uncoordinated eradication and control work done at a property, catchment, local council and state government level, replacing it with a more efficient, more strategic and better funded program. Part of the national approach to managing Lantana was the appointment of a national coordinator and the formation of a working party made up of local and state government representatives and landowners.
People need hope. They need hope, and I think that this committee is going to give people a lot of hope. I think the national strategy is going to give people a lot of hope. I think being here on your program is going to give a lot of people hope.
And it's one of our most widespread weeds, I guess, having broad impacts right across from agriculture, the environment, forestry and tourism.
It's a high priority. It's taking over natural ecosystems, which our shire is fairly well renowned for, but it's also impacting on agriculture, and it is taken quite seriously.
We've lived with it for a long time, and they tend to sort of treat it as a native almost. I think this committee will help bring the focus back onto Lantana as a serious weed and allow us to get going on doing something about it.
The working party visited Brisbane to check out advancements in biocontrol. They met the bugs and rusts that scientists hope will give landholders at least half a chance against the 29 varieties of Lantana.
We're quite looking forward to having a few of the releases of the rust on the pink Lantana. We've got one particular area right next to Dorrigo World Heritage National Park that would be handy to have the pink rust released into.
Yes, I'm greatly encouraged by the biological agents that I've seen here, particularly the rust, the new rust that's working on pink varieties. Also the insects that are being trialled are useful too, because they obviously debilitate the Lantana, and then you can get in with other control measures while it's in a weakened state and do something with it.
We're all looking for the magic bullet, I guess. It's very unlikely we'll find it, but we can keep on looking and we can keep on encouraging the people who are doing research maybe somebody will come up with something, or maybe a combination of agents might be effective.
While biocontrols have much to offer landholders, so does information. To give them the best chance of impacting on Lantana, a control manual has been put together containing the very latest information on the weed. This property, an hour south of Townsville, was chosen for the launch of the Lantana Control Manual. When Stan and Delma Hazelton came here 13 years ago, these lush-treed paddocks were choked with Lantana. They gave themselves 10 years to clean it up.
I was well aware then that there was going to be tree clearing bans and Christ knows what come on down the track. So I put myself into second gear or top gear, and I thought if I really push myself and get into this, I'll have it done before the bureaucrats get out of bed. Because I set down a 10-year plan, and I could envisage what the property would be when I got to the end of that, and that's exactly how it has turned out, even as far as a financial budget that went through that 10-year program.
Stan, how much Lantana did you get rid of?
Oh, geez, 700 or 800 acres. That was within the scrub canopies. We did have some flats that didn't have much timber on at all. That was, really big lantana.
How much of a problem is Lantana now that you've got rid of the bulk of it?
To be honest, the lantana to me now is not a problem. I've pushed it a fair way back. If I look at percentage-wise, we've probably only got about 5% of the area with still some lantana on, and basically that's fenced out into an ecosystem of its own.
That Lantana is in an inaccessible strip where the Hazeltons' property borders a national park.
Well, this is where all those little beetles were released, Andrew.
Oh, yeah.
I was hoping we'd be able to walk in here and see it all chewed to pieces.
When you stand here, does this really tell you how choking Lantana can be?
It tells you that Lantana can be impenetrable at times. This here is probably around the sort of types of lantana that you could sort of work your way through and get through the bush, but there's lantana areas where you just wouldn't be able to walk through it at all.
But for people like Stan who are going to put the time and the effort and the money into fixing the problem on his bit of land, when he looks over the fence and sees the national park, crawling with lantana, is it unfair if he says, well, hang on, you guys should be pitching in too?
I think that you've got a point, and I think it's just resource bound. National parks here just wouldn't be able to throw in the resources to be actually able to get rid of all this lantana, and that's the same for a lot of national parks around Queensland and around Australia.
Stan Hazelton's property illustrates what money, time and planning can achieve, and that if you have lantana, the situation is not necessarily hopeless.
This is a showcase property here. He's done an excellent job, and he's extremely dedicated, and Stan's the sort of fellow that researches everything he does, and when he spends money, he spends it in areas that will pay back for him, and it's just a wonderful showcase for Burdekin Shire, and when producers come here, they go away feeling that they can tackle their weeds.
I think it's amazing. I'm just in awe of him. It's unbelievable.
I think Stan's done a great job on this property. I think it's a very good example of a well-managed beef cattle property, and it's one of the reasons why we've chosen to have the Lantana launch here today as a bit of a motivational factor for people who are struggling with lantana.
Alyssa van Oosterhout wrote the Lantana Manual. She hopes it will give weed warriors all the information they need to identify and kill lantana. She says the good news is the manual is easy to read and full of photos. The bad news? There's no cheap or quick way of dealing with lantana.
My message is to start small and bite off little bits. Only try and deal with as much lantana as you can deal with in a year. And if you clear out 1 acre of your property of lantana, that's an improvement.
Senator Ian MacDonald was given the task of launching the manual. He said for landholders, the key to tackling Lantana was to spend money to make money.
And I was delighted to hear that the landowner on whose property we've launched this actually has increased his carrying capacity from 1 in 20 to 1 in 4. And that's a fairly significant improvement for his property. Another landowner was telling me that he bought his property for about $1 million, spent $1 million on clearing the Lantana, and it's now worth $6 to $7 million.
The manual received a thumbs up from landholders.
Weed control or any property management needs to have a strategy or a goalpost. And without that type of document or roadmap, we're all kicking balls in different directions. So it's extremely important that landholders have the opportunity to use that manual.
Oh yes, it'll be a bit of my bedtime reading, yes.
While farmers agreed the manual's advice on which methods to use on which variety at what time of year would help, they said recent changes to tree clearing laws in Queensland has made their job much harder.
One time if I had a problem I could go straight away and fix it. Now it could take me 3 or 4 years to get permission to touch it. And in that time my asset depreciates pretty severely. At that point you lose interest in throwing money at something that you have no control over.
Under the new tree clearing guidelines it's going to make it a lot more difficult because under a lot of their restrictions you just can't get machinery in there to initially clear and then do the follow-up work that's necessary.
Well, I've got a permit at the moment that allows me to clean up some Lantana in an area along a creek. The problem with it is that it restricts me the diameter of tree that I can touch, the type of species that are in there. It's a really grey area. I mean, if I could sort of go in there and end up being in a lot of strife because I've taken out some trees that really I've got no choice. If I don't take them out, I can't control that area. So it's very it's very restrictive.
Where are we?
After touring productive pasture cleared of Lantana by Stan Hazelton, the Senator was taken to the privately owned property next door. It has a big Lantana problem, which he was able to see and smell. Lantana flowers may be pretty, but they smell a bit like cat's pee.
This thicket that you're looking at now started from just one plant and it's gone bumper to bumper to bumper to bumper to the cancer's just spread. It's impenetrable.
The Senator's seen most of the 20 weeds on the wands list up close and says he can understand the despair farmers feel when they have a weed problem as big as this.
Well, I would despair if I woke up every morning thinking that this was on my property and what could I do with it. But I'm pleased to say there are a lot of folk around who don't despair, they get in there and do something about it.
It's hoped the new manual will encourage more people to tackle as much of their Lantana problem as they can afford.
Eradication, is it possible?
It's fairly unlikely that we'll have no Lantana in Australia because there are some really steep, inaccessible areas that we'll never ever be able to eradicate it from.